Everyone, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast, Authors Edition. Today we have Penny Hopkinson with us. She is CEO, founder, and author at Manual Writers International. Penny, can you say hi to the audience and tell us a bit more about yourself and your company?
Thank you, Charles. Hello, everybody. My name is Penny Hopkinson. I founded Manual Writers International something like 32 years ago. And before that, I was a journalist on the trade and tech side, and I specialized in quality management, which led me very neatly into founding Manual Writers.
Manual Writers specializes in obviously creating manuals. And nowadays, I hired recently a chief of staff in my company, really understand the importance of creating SOP, standard operating procedures. So, do you do some of that for companies? And what generally would you recommend for people creating those guides so that they can be consumed adequately by the team of workers in these companies?
I think standard operating procedures are absolutely vital in companies. They underpin all the quality, conformity, and consistency that you need to ensure that you improve year on year. My advice is that you follow the franchise concept, which is the uniformity and conformity, and ensure that all the procedures from everything from recruitment down to perhaps even selling your business are well documented, because if somebody leaves and or becomes ill, you need somebody to step in immediately and follow those procedures.
How do you make sure that these procedures are well consumed by the team? Because I could write a guide, it could be way too long, for example, it could be full of useless stuff. So, how do you make sure to make a concise guide that is consumed adequately by the team and is enjoyed?
I think this is one of the great problems that people have in writing manuals. And receiving the information in manuals. Today, we have shorter attention spans. We are the TikTok, Instagram age, and we want to consume information at the point of need when needed. We don't want to go through a hard copy manual. And in fact, I haven't done a hard copy manual for getting on for a good 22 years. One of the ways that we do this is by using video and QR codes. You place a QR code at the point that you need it. For example, you need an instruction on stripping down a coffee machine, and the QR code takes you with your smartphone camera straight to the site. You have a how-to video, little bite-sized chunks of video, and that is instantly converted into whatever language you prefer, and you can see everything really easily. And there are platforms out there that will do this.
That's a good way for sure. For written guides, which I still think would be the core of my guide in this company, it would certainly be a combination of text, images, and videos, links to videos, namely. How do you make a text consumable? Because your background is in writing books and chapters, for example, structuring them. Is that the way to go to make a nice little table of contents on Google Docs, for example? I can click the table of contents and it can link to the appropriate chapter. How does one structure a written guide properly?
Right, I have a three-step process. The important thing to start off with is a detailed structure. So you start with a framework, and generally speaking, you start with an introduction to the company. Then you go on to people or your team, then marketing and promotion, day-to-day operations, and then development, growth, and profit. And that's the bit that most people leave out. So you never move on. So from the detailed framework, and you start by creating this framework, it may go to 30, even 40 pages. You have that framework, you can then add the content, the experts are the people in the company that need to add the content. You can use Grammarly, which is a great software program just to ensure that your grammar and your spelling are okay. They can't act as an editor, a professional editor, to get the consistency, but they're a good start point. And then when you have your first rough draft, you then edit it professionally.
That can certainly help. I was also referring to basically getting people to actually consume these guides. So I think it's also part of a company culture to attract people to these guides and constantly remind them that, hey, we've got a structure for that. We need to refer to this guide, which is clear and simple. And before asking, a question and tagging everyone in the team, like probably referring to these guides. Also, like I think it's super important the glossary in a team and the vocabulary that we use. We need to use similar words and precisely know the meaning of these words in our organization. And I guess this is just reminding and over communicating with folks. And obviously, I'm talking in a remote work context. So, what has been your experience kind of deploying these guides and culturally making sure that in the team they use it, or talking with the manager and helping him actually to have team members consume that guide properly?
Okay, there are two ways you do this. You can write it in the contract that knowledge of the operations manual is mandatory. Manager, whenever the training takes place, training is alongside looking at the manual and seeing how the manual fits in the training process, because the manual is basically, with good training, it's an aide memoire. But of course, you can't remember everything that you've learnt during a training session. So you go back to the manual until what you've repeated becomes second nature.
Yeah, for sure. Repetition is the mother of
That
retention, I guess.
it is absolutely. In fact, I think Aristotle said something very similar. What gets repeated gets done.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And my next question is basically, can there be too much of bureaucracy and guides in a company?
That's an interesting question, because I think that's in the eye of the user. You have people who really like to use text, and they can read a lot of it and get a lot out of it. And there are other people for whom pictures say 1,000 words. For example, if you're, let's say you're talking about a DIY franchise, and you've got people who are electricians or um, plasterers. They don't want to read loads and loads of text. So videos are the key here. And one of the ways you can get engagement is by getting your staff to do these videos on your simple smartphone. So you record the work instruction and then convert it into a QR code, which you put at the point of use and need.
Yeah, for sure. Like different styles of learnings and so forth. So I also think there are limits to keeping everything in a guide. Also, people may require more hand holding and screen sharing and how to use this guide. If a guide becomes like Bible thick, I think we may have a problem as well, especially if the table of contents is not clear and you have to scroll and scroll. I think user experience is so important in guides, which is why we're seeing all of these wiki types of softwares pop up nowadays, like Notion and so forth. So I think that's also super important. I also want to ask my last of two questions. How often should we update these guides in a company?
Constantly. Because let's say part of your manual is talking about HR. So you got a lot of rules and regulations that govern it. These are always changing. If you don't change them and somebody does something that is outdated, you could be sued for a great deal of money. I mean, in the UK, I think almost every month something changes in employment law. And if the franchisor doesn't update the manual and the franchisees follow it, doesn't follow the right grievance process or have the right disciplinary process, perhaps in anger, fires somebody who's been there for about 10 years, then you can get into a whole lot of trouble. So my advice would be to constantly review it, but whenever you decide to have an audit of your processes, audit your manual. And you were talking about structuring your manual. It's how it's held. It must be electronic these days. You can either keep it in the cloud, you could use Dropbox, you could use Microsoft Teams, but a lot of people have an intranet. They put it on the intranet in PDF format, which is searchable. You have a drop-down list and you can go directly to whatever it is you want, whether it's people, marketing and promotion, day-to-day operations, or growth and profit, and see exactly what you want. But it must be searchable.
Last question, is selling a business as easy as maintaining your standard operating procedures, showing that these standard operating procedures generate a cash flow, and handing out these full procedures to the next business owners? Is that as simple as that?
I think it can be seen in terms of being simple, but of course this is the way of documenting your intellectual property, and that counts for a great deal. I think if people understood how important an operations manual is and how it can contribute to the value of a business, and very often these days it's part of the balance sheet, then more people would pay attention to writing operations manuals built on quality, uniformity, and conformity, the three main pillars.
Nice. Well, Penny, thank you so much for sharing that value today. Where can people find out more about you?
They can find me on www.manual- which I think is a dash, writers.com.
Cool.
And
Penny Hopkinson on LinkedIn as well.
yes, absolutely. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be delighted to connect with you and take anything further. Even if it's a quick discussion, I offer 20 minutes free of charge and will help you start your strategy off.